Okay. Morning, guys. We just thought we'd pre-record this particular video because just want to make sure that we're on the chat so that we can help you out if you're lost at all. So if you need any IT support, I suppose you can contact us. We'll try our best. So what are we looking at? Well, this is our first lesson in our first part of our biology unit, which looks at a subject called heredity. So heredity is basically how traits are passed on through generations. A pretty important thing. So why do I look the way that I am? Why do I have green eyes? Why am I the height that I am? Why do I have the hair color that I am? These are all traits that are passed down through my ancestors through a process called meiosis, which we are going to look at. But all of these things, of course, require the cells in my body, and that's why we're starting looking at cells. So this is just a quick overview of cells, and it's a general overview. So what I mean by general is that cells are very different. They have widely different functions and structures, and so this is just a generic cell. Not every cell will have or need all the things that are in these particular pictures, but we are going to talk about them. So we need to have a general thing that we can study. So let's get started. So cells, your body is made of millions of these things. You have things like red blood cells, which carry oxygen around your body, white blood cells, which fight infections. You have brain cells, which of course are sending electrical impulses down through my nervous system to my muscle cells, which are causing my muscles to contract, which of course is how I can actually talk to you. So we have several different cells just in this speaking that are working together to produce the desired effect. They're a little bit like Lego blocks. They can connect to make you up, and each of these cells is alive, and each of these cells, of course, has to do what all things have to do when they're alive. They need energy, they need oxygen, and they need to get rid of waste. And so we are going to have a quick look at some things. Inside each cell, just like you have organs, so your lungs, your stomach, each cell has what are called organelles. They are similar to the organs that our body has, and they perform different roles. Now you have this picture. You have it, I think, both filled in and with empty lines, I think. If you haven't, then can you fill this in from this particular picture? Now, some of them we are not going to talk about, but the majority of them we are. Now, I just want to point out two things here. These are, that cytoplasm down the bottom there is pointing to just nothing. Well, not nothing, but like the cells, organelles need to be floating in a mixture or something, and that is called, of course, cytoplasm. And the little black dots, there's many of them, but they are called ribosomes. You can see that ribosome is pointing to a little black dot, but it's not quite as apparent as it probably could be. So make sure that you pause it here and fill in your particular picture, please. Okay, so as we go, you might want to stop, pause it, and write down these notes. These are going to be pretty important. So we're looking first up at what is called the Golgi body, or sometimes it's known also as the Golgi apparatus. Basically what it does is your body produces a thing called proteins, and these proteins do very different things within the cell or within your actual body. So if you're going to make a protein, which you make using several other components of your cell, then you basically need to wrap it. And you need to be able to move it around the cell without it actually doing its function until it gets to the place where you need it. So, for instance, some proteins help in digestion, and you don't want that in the middle of your cell digesting away and, of course, destroying the cell. So, basically, a Golgi body is what we like to say is like the post office of the cell. It basically wraps things for delivery. Okay, so that's the Golgi body. Next, we have the nucleus, and the nucleus is the brain of the cell. It's basically where your DNA is. So that's the code that makes up you. It's unique. No one has the same DNA. And each cell contains about 1 meter of DNA within the nucleus, which seems ridiculous because a meter is a very big measurement, yet the cell is microscopic. And it's all about the arrangement of DNA, which will be a future topic. And the way that it's arranged and wrapped up makes it very, very compact. The nucleus also has within it a thing called a nucleolus. We're not going to worry too much about that. These are basically the ones that you're taking notes on now are the ones that we're going to want you to remember. So the nucleus of your cell holds your DNA, and basically it's the brain. It's where all the instructions for your cell is. So how do we move things around in a cell? How do things actually get to the place that they need to be? Well, they travel through a thing called the endoplasmic reticulum. It is basically something that moves, anything that needs to move within the cell moves through the endoplasmic reticulum. It's also mostly the point where the cell builds things within this endoplasmic reticulum because, of course, if you're going to build something, after you've built it, you're going to need to move it. So depending on what it actually does, it's basically just a transport mechanism. Mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria is known as the power. It is basically the thing that powers your cell. Your cell needs energy just like you need energy, and I suppose your stomach is one of the ways in which you power your body. But all that stuff you're putting in your stomach is going to the mitochondria, and that is producing the power that the cell needs in which to run. Everything needs power in some form or function. So the mitochondria, they look a little bit like, I suppose, I like to say they look a little bit like jelly beans, but that is your mitochondria. Now, if you're going to study sports science from here, ATP is something that you're probably going to be familiar with. So we'll talk about that later on in another episode, I think. Plasma cell membrane. Okay, so your cell only needs certain things within it, and it needs to be held in, like your body. Your skin holds your body in, I suppose. So this is what holds your cell together. It's basically a plasma cell membrane, and it allows things in and it allows things out. So basically it allows waste out and it allows in oxygen and nutrients and food. It does this using what's called a phosphoidal bilayer. You're not going to need to know much about this, but if you study biology next year, it is something that they're going to tell you about how it actually works. So basically, it's like a gate or a fence around your particular cell. It basically sits there and stops things from coming in and that you don't want, and allows things that you want out. Okay, so what happens when your cell is no longer needed? And remember that when you go to the toilet, you are basically shedding dead cells. So cells within your body that you don't need anymore are being processed through your waste system, endocrine system, I think it's called. So a lysosome is basically something that is used to destroy the cell. It's like a self-destruct mechanism. It's basically a digestive enzyme, and it dissolves the cell when it's finished. So when it dies or its function has been completed, your body needs to get rid of it, and that's how it does it. It uses a lysosome. A ribosome is different. This is something that allows the construction of things within your cells. So it's basically like the MDT workshop is a good example. So in the MDT workshop, you can do all your building. It's the place where you do the building. You don't build with the actual workshop, but it's like that. It's a place where you can do the building that you need to build within your cells. So if your cell's building a thing called a protein, which we talked about basically before, it'll do it at a ribosome inside basically the endoplasmic reticulum. So it's basically a place to hold the blueprint for what you actually want to make. It's like Bob the Builder. So they're just a few things that we've gone through that are within inside a cell. I'm going to add a couple of things here. Cytoplasm. So if we go back and have a look at the original picture, cytoplasm just down the bottom there next to ribosome is basically what everything floats around in. It's basically what everything sits in. And you'll notice on this diagram that they have two types of endoplasmic reticulum, a smooth and a large endoplasmic reticulum. And your task after we finish today's lesson is to research what's the difference between a smooth and a large endoplasmic reticulum. I'd like you to write it in your book, take a photo and email it to me if you could, please. So they're animal cells. I can tell that's an animal cell because if you have a look, it's squidgy, I suppose is the best way to say it. It doesn't have a particular shape because, of course, it's quite soft, because you don't need a shape because your cells are basically all interconnected and they stand on your skeleton. Your skeleton is the thing that keeps you upright. Now, that's the big difference between a human and a plant cell, because plants don't have bones. You never snapped off a piece of grass and found a bone within it. So animals have skeletons, and we use these skeletons to hold our cells onto, like a frame, I suppose, if you could say. Whereas a plant cell, and this is an image of a plant cell, doesn't have that. What it actually does is it holds itself up at a cellular level. It has a thing called a cell wall. Now, there are three major differences between plants and animal cells. And I'm going to tell you what they particularly are. But I am also going to just pop back to this particular cell because we have missed something in this PowerPoint. So basically there is another organelle that's quite important, mainly in plant cells, but it's called a vacuole. Now, a vacuole is basically a space within a cell. It's not on this particular picture, but it's a vacuole is a space within a cell. It's these little kind of yellow things in the PowerPoint here. And a vacuole basically stores water. So it's where you store something. So if you've got an excess of something, but you're going to need it later, you might put it, say, in a backpack. Well, cells don't have backpacks, so they don't have cupboards or different things like that. But what they do have is a vacuole. So a vacuole is a place where we can store things like water that we need within our cell, so that if we need it, we don't have to get it from somewhere else. We can just simply take a drink, like a drink bottle, I suppose. Now, plants have a very large vacuole, whereas animal cells only have small ones. Now, plants have large vacuoles because they need them to make the cell what is called turgid. Now, turgid means that basically, if you think about a box, you push out. If you put things within a box, you can't push the box in. But if you have a cardboard box and there's nothing in it, then you can easily push the sides in. So plants need to have this cell wall to be solid so that, of course, it can stand up. So the vacuole is pumped full of water in a plant, and that helps the plant to basically stay up. Now, we all know that if we don't water a plant, it basically wilts. So in other words, it falls over. And that's because, of course, the plant will start stealing water from this vacuole to keep itself alive. And as it does that, the cell wall kind of sags a little bit. And that's why, of course, plants wilt. We call it turgidness in science. I don't even know if that's a word. We call it turgid. And that's, of course, to help the plant keep itself up. So the cell wall is one of the things that is different between a plant and an animal cell. Like a plant cell still has a cell membrane, but it has a cell wall as well, whereas an animal cell does not have it. Now, both have vacuoles, but the plant cell's vacuole is much bigger, and because, of course, it's used to have, with the cell wall to keep the plant upright. So the difference between a plant, I suppose, is, here we go, 3 extra features. So here's number 1, the cell wall. It's made of a thing called cellulose. And it's one of the reasons that, say, a cow, for instance, has to eat so much grass. We do not process, or animals do not process cellulose well. It's actually required to be eaten several times. So a cow, for instance, gets around this by having several different stomachs. So it will eat the grass first, and then it vomits it up in the form of cud, chews it again, and then puts it down to a second stomach where it, of course, sits there and refines. So eating plant matter is not very effective for the energy that you need. Eating meat, for instance, you can eat a lot less meat and get a lot more energy a lot quicker because you don't have to break down that cellulose. So by moving to a meat-based diet, I suppose, you actually save a lot of time in eating, and also too, you don't need to graze all day like a cow does, for instance. So cell wall, as it said, is similar to a skeleton for a plant. It basically helps the plant stay up and grow upwards towards the sunlight. So if you have a look, that plant cell reasonably does have all the things that an animal cell has, like a nucleus, a nucleolus. It's got its vacuole, it's got cytoplasm and a Golgi apparatus, but it does have a larger vacuole, as I said. But one thing that it doesn't have that plants do are these things, and they're called chloroplasts. They're basically green, although you can have red chloroplasts because you can have red plants. But basically what they do is they take sunlight and they use water and the process called photosynthesis to make the plant's food. So plants don't, like we do, go to the supermarket because of course they can't walk or hunt their food. Generally speaking, plants do photosynthesis. That's why they're called producers. So basically every food chain starts with a plant and it all starts through the process of photosynthesis, which happens in these things called chloroplasts. So a chloroplast is only in plant cells. Animal cells don't have them. So an upcoming question, say in a test, might look something along the lines of what's the difference between a plant and animal cell? Well, a couple of different things. You'll notice that cell wall gives that plant a very, very distinct structure, whereas animal cells don't have a cell wall, so they're more splodgy, I suppose, more kind of blobby. They have a vacuole, but the plant's vacuole is much larger, and plant cells have chloroplasts where animals do not. So that kind of question would probably be an at standard on your biology test. So just as a bit of an indication about that. What do they look like in real life? Well, we can see here, we have a look at two little microscope images that I've got from the internet. On the right, you can see that animal cell, and you can see what I mean about kind of a blobby kind of structure around the outside there. You can see that big dark thing in the middle of that, down the bottom of that animal cell is its nucleus. And then if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see the plant cell. And you can see the box-like structure that's in it. Now we are going to do another lesson on this, and so I will show you that in a little bit more detail. But I suppose really that was your first lesson in biology. So what do I want? Well, first off, find this picture in the pack that we gave you, fill it in. Task 1. Task 2, make sure you've got these notes. They are important, and you are going to need to tell me about an organelle or two. So I might ask you, what is the nucleus? And you would say, the nucleus is the brain of a cell, Mr. Robinson. It's where all the DNA instructions are actually contained. I might ask you what mitochondria is. Well, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It provides all energy for the cell to perform its functions. Now, if we have a look towards the end here, the other thing I wanted you to do was task 3, find out what is the difference between the rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And I'd like you to write that down in your book as well, and take a photo of it and then send it through to my email. Okay, so there are the 3 tasks that I want you to do for this particular thing. This information is important and you will need it. So please make sure that you copy it down. Okay, guys, well, thank you very much. And I will see you in the chat. Bye.